Hey class, in this video we're going to continue working with Adobe Animate and we're going to be learning how to create a tween. Tween is a way of automating animation rather than doing frame by frame animation like we did in the previous video. It's a shorthand for in between. So what it does is it calculates all the frames in between two keyframes. So we take two keyframes, we stretch them out, and then the program does the math for us of how to move from one to the next. So it's a much more efficient way of animating. It gives us a more kind of computerized, smooth quality, but we can do a lot more in a shorter period of time. So there's some advantages to that. There's some disadvantages, but we'll look at how to do a few different types of tweens with Animate. And again, this is, if you're an animation major, this is something that's going to be something you do a lot in both 2D and 3D animation in the future. If you're not an animation major, this is just kind of a very typical thing that a lot of different software do that you'll see in lots of different contexts that are not necessarily animation or visual graphics. So it's a good sort of, mathematical concept to understand as well as an animation concept. So let's get to it. I'm going to go over to Animate. And for this one, I'm going to make a slightly more complex animation. So instead of starting with just a square, I'm going to do something in HD, which is high definition. So I'm going to go back to, let's see, character animation. And you can see there's HD and full HD. These days now we have 4K, so the level of standard, as we get faster computers and bigger monitors and stuff, it keeps growing. But HD is the same sort of like dimensions as 4K, or like most YouTube videos, most movies are made in these dimensions. So that's going to be fine for what we're working on today. I'm going to change the frame rate to 24 and then click create. So with this one, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. You can see that's at 50%. So our stage or our canvas is a little bit bigger. I can also hit Command 2 to focus the whole thing, but I usually kind of zoom out a little bit just so I can see stuff to get started. And so we're going to be doing three types of tweens. We're going to be doing them with different things, but the way that we're doing the tweens is not necessarily the only way to achieve different things. I'm just using a few examples. So when you start to work on your own project, you can think, sort of creatively about what the best way to approach things might be. I'm going to make my timeline a little bit bigger for today, even though it'll be a little harder to see on the screen. I want to have a little bit more time to work with, so maybe like 4 seconds. The final animation for this project should be between 10 and 30 seconds. My demo is not going to be that long, but just keep that in mind when you're thinking about your project. My frames look really small. I wonder if I can, let's go to comfortable. Is that gonna, doesn't change much. Okay. That looks fine. We'll move the timeline around if we need to. Okay, so the first thing we're going to start with is a shape tween. And when you hear shape, you might think that we're changing the shape, but it's really anything about the shape. So I'm actually going to use it to change the color. So I'm going to call this background, and I'm just going to make my kind of background color fade from one color to another. So I'm going to grab a rectangle, and I'm just going to fill up the entire stage with this rectangle. And I'm going to change the color to black. I might have to just fill that in. Or no, I have to select this. Okay, there we go. Okay, and I'm just going to fade this into a color, just like you would see at the beginning of a movie or animation or video or whatever. So what I want to do is move ahead in the timeline and then automate this change. But there's a couple of issues with that. One is, remember, I can't move my playhead if I only have one frame. So that's our first issue. And two is we need to add in a tween once we get there. Okay, so there's a couple ways I can deal with that. One is I can hit the 5 or insert frame key until we get to 1. And then I can go all the way to 1 and hit 6 to create a keyframe. that's probably how I would do it normally. Another way that we could do this, if I undo that, is I could just drag this guy all the way over here, and now we'll have that keyframe here. I didn't do it correctly because I removed it from here. So actually, I think I have to hold Option and do that. Yeah, if you hold the Option key, it'll create that keyframe. So a couple different ways to do that. Once I have this new keyframe over here, I can change the color. So I'm going to select my big square. I'm going to go to the fill, and let's make like a nice yellow, kind of orangey sunrise color, something like that. And so now we just have these two colors, and there's obviously no animation in between them. But we have these two keyframes. And so what a tween does is it takes a value from one keyframe, in this case the black color, and it automates all the in-between values to the final value. And that's true. You could do that with shape, you could do it with size, you could do it with position, rotation, scale. Here we're going to do it with color. So for this one, I'm doing a shape tween. I'm going to right click on my my frames, and I'm going to go to create shape tween. And it makes this little orange colored keyframe arrow, or tween arrow. Orange is just a coincidence. It's not because the square turns orange. But now we see that animation happen over time. So instead of trying to do every single color in between the colors, which would be very challenging, we let the computer do it for us. The other nice thing about this tween is if I move this guy, if I want this to be shorter, it's just going to update that tween for me. If I want this to be longer, if I want it to be 2 seconds long, I can move it all the way down here, and it just automatically does it for me. It's very fast. The computer obviously can calculate all those numbers really quickly, and there we go. We've got our nice little fade in. So that's a shape tween. There's a lot of stuff that you can do with that, but there's other tweens that we're going to cover that are a little bit more complex. So I'm going to lock my background layer. I'm going to save. I haven't saved my animation yet, so let's save this. I'm going to be saving this one. I'm going to call for the premise for this assignment. It's like animate an emotion. So I'm going to say, for the sake of the demo, that I'm animating the emotion happiness. So I'm going to call this happiness.fla. You can call it whatever you want, but it's good to kind of match the title so you can remember what you're working on. So there we've got our little fade in. And so now what I want to do is I want to add some text that will appear and then animate off screen. So I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to call this text. So we want the layers to kind of look like what they sound like. And I'm going to take this text. I'm going to move over here. So I'm going to make the text kind of appear. You don't have to do this, but it's kind of nice. So I'm going to write happiness. And then if I want to change the text, just like in Photoshop, I can go over to the object menu over here. I'm going to hide myself for a second because I'm going to cover up a lot of these options. So let's choose a cool font. It's kind of showing me some different fonts. That one's kind of cool. Let's see if we've got any other interesting ones. Seems like I have a lot of really random, weird fonts in here. Oh, this one, emoji one, is kind of cool, although I don't think it's works for this particular one. Let's see. That's kind of cool. I like that typewriter effect. We can change the size here. So if the text might be really small at first, so you can increase the size. It seems to max out at 96. I wonder if yeah, it'll go higher than 96. For some reason, when I'm dragging this, it maxes out at 96. I can also space out the letters a little bit. If I need more space, I can increase the size of this box. And maybe I can space out the letters a little bit. That's kind of nice. So that looks good. We can also open paragraph and center it. That's kind of nice. And then for the fill for the text, I'm going to use black. So we're not going to be able to see it at the beginning, but then as it fades in, we'll see it. Okay, so let's see what that looks like now. I'm going to select out of here. Okay, that's cool. I'm gonna move it like down here a little bit. Okay, so what we're gonna do is when the background fades in, we see happiness, and then I'm gonna start an animation to move happiness outside of the window. So if I want something to stay in the same place, I need to add a little keyframe here to kind of like tell it, stop here. So I'm just going to go there and add a keyframe. I'm just going to hit 6 on the keyboard, or you can click the keyboard button. That way, any animation that I add after this isn't going to start back here. Anytime you add a tween, it's just going to go to whatever the previous keyframe was. So then I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to add another keyframe here. And then I'm going to take my little my text box and move it down here. And so now I can make another tween. So you could do a shape tween with this, but what I'm going to do here instead is I'm going to use a classic tween. This is just to cover another type of tween. It's asking me, do I want to convert it to a symbol? It can't just move the text. And so I'm going to say, okay. I'm going to talk about symbols in the next video for this week, which will be an optional video. But if you want to learn more about symbols, take a look at that one. So I'm going to change that. And now we get this purple tween. And it works pretty much the same way as our previous tween. So that's our classic tween. And so now I'm going to add another tween in here, which is going to be a motion tween, which is a much more complex tween with a lot more sort of editing possibilities. So let's lock this layer. And I'm just going to have like a little ball bounce through my scene. So I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to call this ball. I'm going to hold down on the rectangle shape and go to oval. And I'm going to, let's choose a color for the ball. Since we have an orange background, maybe like a blue color will be good. And I'm going to hold shift to keep the ball even width and height. And I'm going to put it over here, and I'm just going to animate it through the scene. So there's my ball, and I'm going to get my selection tool and click on the ball. And so now I'm not, in the previous tweens, I had to go ahead and add a keyframe and then tween in between. With my motion tween, I actually don't even have to do that. I just have to set up the motion tween, and then anything I change, Animate will just automatically figure that out for me. So I'm going to right click on here. I'm going to go to create motion tween. And I'm going to say, yes, I want to convert it to a symbol. That's fine. And now if I just go over here and I just move the ball across the canvas, it creates this little tween with keyframes for me. It's kind of hard to see because it's using a orange thing, and I have an orange background, but hopefully you can see it in there. I don't actually know if it always assigns the same colors. But that's what it looks like. So anyway, now you can see it added this tiny little keyframe. So the motion tween kind of automates some stuff for us. So we don't have to add our own keyframe. We can add keyframes into the tween, but it really automates a lot of stuff for us. And you can see these little dots in here are these sort of implied keyframes. And we can actually edit those individual keyframes. So there's a lot more information about the tween here. So for example, if I click on one of these dots and I pick it up, wow, it's kind of hard. I'm just going to turn off the background for a second. So if I lift up this little dot, it's going to kind of interpolate or calculate all these changes over time, and it's going to create this little arc. So I can, edit this whole thing without really doing a lot on the timeline. But I can also add new keyframes. So for example, let's say I wanted to get to this point a lot faster than it does. I could make this a keyframe. So I could click here and hit 6 to add a keyframe. And then I could drag this keyframe earlier in my timeline. And now it's going to get to there much faster. So it kind of speeds up and then it slows down. So I can save keyframes within the animation that Animate makes and then move those around. So there's a lot of like different possibilities with this. Another thing I could do is animate other components. So if I get my transform tool and I change the scale of this, it's just going to automatically animate that for me. I don't have to add any other keyframes. I just get this nice motion, I guess shrinking. And you can see it happens starting with that second keyframe. So it doesn't do it across the whole thing. Anytime I add a new change, it's going to look back to the previous keyframe to start that change. So you do have to be a little bit careful about like the order of things you do. If you want it to change size the whole time, we'd have to get rid of that other keyframe and kind of redo it. So let's add a couple other things in here. So if I go here and I just drag this guy down, it's just going to kind of do that for me, which is nice. So I get this little bump, and I can go here and let's make the guy bounce out like that. Okay, so that's kind of nice. And then if I want, so now this is a keyframe. If I want this to kind of happen a little bit earlier, I can grab that keyframe and move it back here. So the first bounce happens fast, and then it kind of bounces out. And then I kind of want it to bounce again. So let's like lift this up like that. So it bounces, and then it's kind of like starting to go farther into the distance. And so it kind of like looks like it's slowing down a little bit. So obviously I could keep tweaking and do all sorts of crazy stuff with this, but this is just kind of a basic example to get you started. So let's turn on the background again, and let's take a look at this animation we've got. I'm going to select something else to hide that. Okay, so I don't know if I've really captured happiness exactly, but you can see how I can start to add these elements together to get towards this happiness idea. If I don't want the ball to go in front of the text, I can move this layer down. Whatever's on top will appear on top, just like in Photoshop. So whatever you think is gonna look good is fine. But yeah, that's a basic idea. Let's check our rundown and see how we're doing. Okay, we've covered everything. So, there's obviously lots more detail that we could go into, but those are just kind of the three basic types of tweens and ways to edit them. And, from there you just kind of go wild, just play around with it. We're going to make a first draft. Next week we'll work on a storyboard, so you can play around with different ideas and see what's possible. And then the storyboard is a good way to plan out a final version of the animation, to say these are the things that I want to happen, and plan it out in advance, and then go back into the software and execute on that. So I am going to do another video where I talk about symbols to make something that we can add into this. But not everybody is going to need to do that. Some people are going to ask about it and want to do basically what a symbol does, which is basically put an animation inside of an animation. So what that video will go over is, I'm just going to, for an example, turn the ball into a bird that's like flapping its wings. So the flapping and the motion can happen at the same time. So if you want to work on the symbol part, do that, go to the next video. If you want to skip that, that's fine. I'm going to go over exporting the video file and then posting on OpenLab in another video. So just skip to that video and I'll go over that submission process. So I'll see you guys in one of those two videos next.